David Brewster here in an episode of Chordplay. This is part 2 of the Chords of Ratt. And so far on this channel I've put together 2 Warren DeMartini Three-For-All lessons where we looked at some of his licks. And there's the original, Chordplay episode, the Chords of Ratt. And I've had lots of requests to feature more of Warren's music and the music of Ratt. So we're going to dive a little bit deeper in this episode. And Ratt's essential. They formed in San Diego in 1976. Eventually they became known as Ratt. I think originally they were known as Mickey Ratt. Somewhere around 1981, they got rid of the word Mickey, and they were just dubbed Ratt. I think Robin Crosby joined around 81, Warren DeMartini joined in 82. He was like 19 when he joined forces with these guys, and definitely, Ratt's unstoppable. They exploded back in the 80s, and they're still respected today. I've talked to so many people over the years about Ratt, especially Warren DeMartini. There's just an endless outpour of respect and love for Warren DeMartini. I love him too. I mean, he's a great guitarist, definitely one of my earliest influences. That goes all the way back to when I was a teenager. But also Robin Crosby, late great guitarist in Ratt. And he was like this hard rock guitar architect, songwriter, and his chords and progressions and these things that he would do. Just very different and off the beaten path, where it's not the typical things that you would expect from a hard rock guitarist. It kind of reminds me a little bit of Steve Clark, from Def Leppard, the late great guitarist in Def Leppard. And Steve was kind of this architect of chords and rhythms and progressions and stuff, and definitely the secret weapon of Def Leppard. And Robin Crosby, I feel, was the secret weapon in Ratt. The original Ratt Chordplay episode I put together featured a lot of songs from Out of the Cellar and also some songs from Invasion of Your Privacy. And this episode's going to dive deeper, and we're going to hit songs from Detonator and Reach for the Sky, Dancing Undercover, and a couple more from Invasion of Your Privacy. So here we go. Alright, with the opening, that's Shame, Shame, Shame from the Detonator album, and we're in drop D tuning for this, and it's a killer riff, something like this. So we're in drop D, and we're basically banging on this D octave right there in the beginning. So we're hitting that D octave, and we're basically, grabbing that low E, which is tuned to D. We're playing that twice, and then that single D note, and we're going to do that a couple times like this. So it's like 2 low E's, 1 D, 2 low E's, 1 D, 2 low E's, 1 D, and then 3 low E's. And then you're grabbing this. It's going to feel like a partial C. You could also think of that as part of a D7 sus4, since we're playing that low D, against it. So right there, it's like that partial C or D7 sus4, partial G, like a G over D, and then it slides back to that F. And right there, you're doing that partial C to partial G, slide to that partial F, grab that partial G and slide to that partial F again, and then open up that D and G strings like this. Then you're going to grab the low D twice, grab that partial C or that D7 sus4 again, and you're going to end with that G5 right there. And it all happens really fast. Of course, you got that pick scrape in the beginning. Tears your head off. It's awesome. Next up is Never Use Love from Invasion of Your Privacy, and this time we're tuned down a half step, and this is a killer riff like this. We're basically banging on these almost like balls to the wall by Accept. Kind of reminds me of those chords like this. And that partial, E5 right there, and you're basically hammering on the open strings to the fretted part of that E5. So that open, A and D to the fretted A and D on the 2nd fret. And you're going to do that hammer on again, because you're moving from that E5 up to this, and that's basically an implied, E minor 7. And you could also think of that as like a G5 over E, but I'm relating that to E. So there's D and G, the flat 7 and minor 3rd of E. So I'm thinking E minor 7 right there. And then right there you're moving up to the 7th fret on the A and the D, to the 7th fret on the D and the G. And if we keep that kind of, E thinking like that, then we can think of this as like an E sus4, and then over here, that's basically like an E7 sus4, because we get that D and that A note, and the A is your sus4. And that's how I'm thinking of those chords, related to E. Now you could relate those to E, G, A, and D if you wanted to. But I'm thinking E, because that's all you hear is that E root note. And like the second time, it basically does like a slight squeal on that D, and then a single E, and then you hear this chromatic, D, D flat to C right there. And then you hear that single G note right there on the 5th fret. So the first pass is like this. And then do it again. And the second time, just use power chords right there. D, D flat to C. And then do it all over again. Next is Take a Chance from the album Dancing Undercover, and we're still tuned down a half step, and it's really cool, like this. Another pick scrape, in the beginning right there, and then we're basically grabbing this. So you can think of that as like a G over B right there. Think of G major, but we're just grabbing the middle part of G major, like that. So it's the B and D fretted there on the A and the B strings, and then the open D and G string, like that. There, you're going to basically grab the root note and then strum the upper part of that chord, and then chromatically walk up, B, C, C sharp to that A power chord. And then you're going to do that A power chord, grab that single G, and then move to E5, and then bang the B and the high E string open right there. And then a D5 to E5 power chord. And then do it again. Like the second time, you hear this kind of a slid fill right there, and then do the first part again, and then right there's a C sus2, and then kind of like an AC/DC open position G5 to A5, and then the verse starts and goes to B right there. That's a really cool kind of bluesy, intro part. Okay, next up is Between the Eyes, which is also from Invasion of Your Privacy, and we're still tuned down a half step, and this would be the chorus section, and it's this kind of cleaner guitar part. Something like this, it's really cool. chord, that's basically an F5, but it's all spread out. You know, where you're grabbing that F octave and then grabbing that C note up there. And that's basically G7 right there, that G, F, and that open B. And then you're going to basically play this. And that's basically A minor flat 6. And that F note right there is your flat 6. And then right there you're going to move to this. And that's basically, you could think of that a couple different ways. You could think of it as G over B, but you could also think of it as a partial, you know, B minor chord. And we've got that B, that open D, and then the fretted D there on the B string. So really interesting the way that's kind of moving with the root notes. Are kind of filled out. And I suspect Robin Crosby probably wrote that. That seems like a very, you know, Robin Crosby-esque, you know, guitar part. Those kind of hidden, you know, clean guitar chords. And it's really cool. Next up is I Want a Woman, which is from the album Reach for the Sky, and we're in standard tuning for this example, and it's something like this. So right there we're basically using, it's an E, and we're doing this implied chord progression. And as tempted as you might be to fill out the chord and play, you know, bigger shapes, I think they're really just playing these little kind of two-note partial chords like this. Because you could play that like this. So that's basically an implied E major 7 right there, and then E5 to E sus2. But he's not doing it like that. I think it's just, like I said, those two notes, you know, kind of partial chords. That sounds more like the album than the bigger, you know, kind of chord form does. And then move back a whole step, and that's like an implied, you know, D major 7 to D5. You got that little single note riff right there. Kind of based around, you know, E minor 7. Starts, it goes to B, which it seems like Ratt does that a lot. They'll have this opening riff in E, and then when the verse comes, it shifts to the 5 chord, which is B. Interesting. The last example is from the song Body Talk, which is from Dancing Undercover, and we're tuned down a half step, and this is the intro part, and there's something really interesting happening with this chord, you know, idea right here. And there's this slapback delay effect too, which is missing, but the guitar part's like this. So we're basically grabbing the C sharp octave right there, and then you're hearing the high E and the B open, and that's basically an implied C sharp minor 7 when you do that. And then you want to basically open up that A string, and that's going to be an implied A add 9. So you're basically keeping everything the same, you just change the root note. Part's really interesting. So that's going to be an implied B flat minor 7, and then you hear that root note change to B, and that's basically a B6 sus2 implied. So that chord progression's really cool. And you can arrange those notes like that where you can use all of your fret hand fingers. You can almost turn it into like a workout or an exercise. And you're missing the slap back delay effect because you don't really notice it so much in the first part. But right here, you're basically hearing that C sharp again. Effect actually pushes, you know, that guitar part into a different place, which is really cool. And of course there's power chords. Eventually, and then it goes in the verse right there. But that guitar part's really cool. That's going to wrap this episode of Chordplay with part 2 of the Chords of Ratt. And like I mentioned earlier, I'm a huge Warren DeMartini and Ratt fan. You know, it goes all the way back to when I was in middle school and high school and just learning, you know, to play the guitar, watching Headbangers Ball with my sister. And we were both into Ratt, but for different reasons. I was into Warren's guitar playing and Robin's, you know, ideas. Of course, she was just interested in Warren DeMartini, I think. But lots of memories and history with this band and their music, you know, working in cover bands or working with students or just learning it, you know, on my own or whatever. Definitely there's a ton of stuff you can tap into, you know, by working on some of Ratt's music. So anyway, leave some feedback and comments. Please subscribe to my lessons and I'll be back before you know it with more content material. Thank you.